I swear to you, I didn't cause any California fires, I didn't send bombs to anti-Trump celebrities, and I certainly didn't release Cthulhu in an effort to determine your worth and abilities. For truthfully, the only measure of your worth is your charitable acts, such as going to patreon.com/evacstation. For less than the cost of a comic book that could cause us to become a supervillain, you can support our show and keep us from having the free time to start our own villainous schemes, but still have free time to make these shows for you. Again, that's patreon.com/evacstation. Now, on to the show.
Unbreakable, they alive, damn it, it's a miracle. Unbreakable, they alive, damn it, with females all strong and unbreakable, they alive, damn it, it's a miracle. Unbreakable, they alive, damn it. That's gonna be fascinating transition.
Now that we know who you are, we know who we are. We are not mistakes. It all makes sense. In those internet shows, you know who you can tell the podcast hosts have lost their minds? They've been doing it for a year, and it's been 2 or 3 episodes after they talked about the last fucking airbender. We are. I'm your host, Aaron J. Waseska, and my one weakness is my ability to touch and break any bit of technology. Makes writing a podcast kind of tricky. Luckily, I have Ryan Metters. I don't know why I put the J there. I don't know why. Everyone's got the middle initial J this week. And his one weakness is haunted animatronics stalking him at night.
Fuck.
It's a good thing we also have Bo Ketchum, and his only one weakness is technically 2. Ass and titties. Hey, at least it's not a weakness to water. We're practically invincible.
I think you missaid Bo's name. It's actually Bo J. Ketchum.
Bo J. Ketchum. Ah, fuck.
Which he also has weakness to ass and titties too. So
yep.
That works. Bo J. Ketchum was my superhero name. My alter ego is just Bo Ketchum. Because I like to throw him off a little bit.
No one would ever guess. No one. And then before we get too far into this, make sure you check out the links down below for Patreon, Peepa, YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, as well as Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, and all the other platforms our podcast is hosted on. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. As always, what you been watching?
Damn it. As always, I have to scramble and think about what the fuck I was watching.
I've been watching the movies that are going to talk about since last week that we've talked about.
That's fair. That's fair.
I've been scrambling. I got Unbreakable watched earlier in the week, and I felt like I was pretty proud, but I literally just finished Unbreakable 10 minutes ago, and I'm looking at my wife scrambling like, hey, thoughts, what are your thoughts? Like, holy shit, like, oh my god, I wish I had time to watch this movie 3 more times. So I've been watching our movies. Thanks, M. Night Shyamalan.
That's very fair. I'll get mine out of the way real quick while Ryan continues to think about his. Like I said, I've got a backlog I've been working through. I have a list of things I've been watching over the past month or so I can kind of, throw them out there for these podcasts recording like months early. And I've been watching BoJack Horseman season 5. For those who have not watched it yet, BoJack Horseman is an animated show on Netflix you can watch right now. It's about a depressed man who it looks like a horse because it's a cartoon, and why not? And you can see it go through struggles of drug addiction and abuse and just all this sort of like self-harming nonsense that really kind of captures what anxiety and depression can really do to a person when they're like unchecked and go to extremes. And I really like it in what it does. It is not something for everybody. It is incredibly depressing at times, but season 5 leaves it with a really hopeful note, and I'm really excited to see where they go from here. So, if you haven't checked it out, go check it out.
Nice. All right.
That's a good movie. I liked it, or a good TV show. I liked it's kind of like the Californication of animation.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I like that. I like your take on it. Like, at first pick, you look at just this washed up actor, so to speak, and you're entertained by the fact that it's different characters and it's animation. But the whole like take on depression, anxiety, like I never thought it was that deep. So I got to get back into that show.
It's really good. Like I said, season 5, it might be my favorite one, honestly.
Well, once I get done watching all these M. Night Shyamalan movies, maybe I can get back to watching regular television.
Absolutely. And Ryan, what do you got?
Oh, well, when you brought up Netflix, it actually reminded me that recently I checked out the second season of Big Mouth, which was a Netflix original cartoon, which I found hilarious. It essentially follows a group of kids as they go through puberty in high school, in grade school, and it's got great humor. I love the comedy. And they've got they also have, like, all of the kids, they have these big, like, they have these hormone monsters and like other monsters that like are kind of like mythical figures that only they can see, and they represent like the shit that they're going through, like the hormone monster or the shame wizard or the depression cat. And it's really, really good. It's hilarious. It's hilarious, but it's also like really, really poignant, and like it tackles a lot of things that young people go through as they're growing up, and both the great ways to process them, and the not great ways that we end up processing them anyway. So I definitely recommend giving it a shot.
Oh,
Excellent,
yeah.
excellent.
I think Big Mouth is, as far as a show that can relate to anybody who was a teenager and went through puberty, this show relates to you. Hence, It relates about everybody because we've all gone through that. Big Mouth, oh my God, that show is just, I've never had such a show be like so in your face about everyday struggle as a teenager. I love that show. And Jason Mantzoukas is one of my favorite actors. And the fact that he plays such a great character on that show just makes me super excited.
Excellent. I'll check that one out because it keeps popping up on my recommended list.
It's real good. You will enjoy the hell out of that.
Cool.
Man, the period monster, or like first season when she goes through her period for the first time. Oh my God, your mouth will just drop to the floor. Like, am I really watching this?
I'm gonna have to rope Amanda to that one. She when you said period monster, I think she might get a laugh out of that. Anyway, today's episode of The Shyamalyzing. We'll be covering the 2000 film Unbreakable. It's currently not available for streaming, but you can rent it on various digital platforms like YouTube, Amazon, and so forth. The total cumulative gross is sitting at $154,500,000. This film features the talents of Robin Wright, Spencer Treat Clark, Charlene Woodward, Samuel L. Jackson, and is this Bruce Willis again? We can't seem to get away from this guy. Probably won't see him again for a long time, I bet you.
Probably like 16 years. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, about 16 years. Unbreakable has been nominated for several awards, but has only won 2, including the Golden Trailer for Best Horror and/or Thriller, and a German Bogey Award in Silver. I don't know what that is, but I can only assume it's a good thing.
Are bogeys usually good?
I don't know.
I feel like they're bad.
Well, it's German, though. I don't know what it means in German.
Yeah,
listeners,
even just
please let us know what the fuck that means.
Yeah, if we have any German listeners out there, please tell us what the Bogey Award in Silver means, because I couldn't make heads or tails of that. And I have a few quick bits of trivia here for you. First off, M. Night Shyamalan always wanted Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson. Had them in mind to play the roles of David Dunn and Elijah Price. This marks the 4th film to feature Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson together. The others were Loaded Weapon, Pulp Fiction, and Die Hard with a Vengeance.
God, Die Hard with a Vengeance. And
then,
that's an excellent movie. That's an excellent movie. I will argue that.
And then, of course, the scene where David's son tries to shoot him to prove he has superpowers is based on a popular urban legend that George Reeves was once confronted by a child who asked to shoot him with a real gun while he was in a Superman costume. According to the legend, Reeves, just like David, got the boy to put the gun down by convincing him it would ricochet and hurt someone else.
Oh my God, that's awful. But that's good. But that's awful.
I mean, it's awful from a mental health standpoint, but it's really cool from a Reeves is that kind of cool dude kind of thing.
Jesus Christ.
Could you imagine the balls of that? Like, just saying that to a kid, and there's that breath of, like, a moment where you're like, I hope to God this kid doesn't shoot me.
Yeah. I mean, shit. I like when we got to that scene in the movie. I had forgotten that scene was in the movie.
I'd forgot a lot of this film, if I'm being honest. It's been way too long.
I saw him pull out the gun, and I'm like, okay, they're gonna do something with that gun. That's literally Chekhov's gun right there. So something silly.
No, the gun's just gonna sit on the table. It's fine. Everything's fine. You know, now I want to write a movie where there's a gun on the table and it just sits through the whole movie, just to mess with people. All right, and then before we get into the actual synopsis here, let's get some initial thoughts out of the way. Gentlemen, what are your thoughts on this film going into it?
What you thinking, Ryan? You go first. I think I always go first, so I'm gonna let you go first on this.
This movie was better than I remember. So, like, I had a lot of fun with this movie. I think there's a lot of subtlety in the movie that has like the fact that he uses such a simple premise and a setting allows him to do some really clever and subtle things that come off really well because they're not like bogged down. I'll wait till we get like to the in-depth discussion to like talk about it, but I really, really like this. I liked it more than I thought I was going to when I was reminiscing on it.
I'm kind of with Ryan. Going through this, I was very kind of surprised. I knew it was going to be a good movie going into it, but I was very surprised on how well it's held up. And just like what Ryan was saying, I can't wait to get into the depth of this conversation because of the year that this movie came out, which I think is going to be really significant on how impactful this movie is to the cinema history.
Ooh, okay. All right.
Interesting. I'll go up next. So, before I say anything, I do like it. I think it was really good. But I do think it's a bit slower than I remember it being, and it feels like a bit of a slow burn. Not that it's necessarily a bad thing. It could be a good thing. I'm still undecided on that yet. But it's very well acted, and it's a mostly good narrative to work from, so I'm excited to dive into this and see where it goes.
All right. Well, I hear tell you have a synopsis for us, yeah?
Well, you know, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, but today I do, so we're going to see how this turns out. Okay, here we go.
Make it a good one.
Security officer.
All drinks are made from computer, right?
Yep.
Okay, got the.
All right, cool.
Got the warning out there. Okay. Security officer David Dunn is the sole survivor of a horrific train wreck that may or may not be a terrorist operation. We'll find out later. He thinks nothing of this near miraculous feat until a note left on his window asking if he's considered switching his cable provider. On the other side of that note, though, it does say, "How many days have you actually been sick?" David asks around to everyone else because he can't seem to remember not being sick. I feel like I won't remember that, but whatever. Wanting answers, he goes to the sender of the note, the owner of the Limited Art Gallery, Elijah Price. We are introduced to Elijah through obligatory flashback showing he was born with broken bones and is prone to being injured or sick quite often, giving him the nickname Mr. Glass. One day, sick of motherfucking casuals in his motherfucking gallery, Elijah is happy to see David visit him. He discusses his theory that David is a superhuman based on the events of the train wreck. David shits all over this theory for a large portion of the film before revealing he really hasn't been injured ever and has been living a lie to stay with the love of his life. Aww. Accepting his role as Poncho Man, David uses his invulnerability and his lesser-explained psionic ability to see horrible things people have done through touch. He ignores rapists and thieves to focus on a family hostage situation. I mean, he's Superman. Even Superman probably wouldn't handle rapists anyway. David saves the family, which in turn saves the relationship of his family. It's all coming together, folks. He returns to Elijah to thank him and give him a respectful handshake, like any American would do. By touching Elijah, But touching Elijah reveals that he was the Mandarin all along and caused all the various disasters in search of the unbreakable man. David leaves, sending Elijah to an institution for the criminally insane. All the while, Elijah claims that it was the children who were wrong. David and Elijah will return.
Spoilers. Tag your spoilers.
Oh man, like one of these times we got to rank top 5 synopsis readings. That ranks in the top 5. That was a good one.
I had to trim it down a little bit. I had to keep it short to the point.
Gives him a handshake like any good American would do.
Not too hard because his hand might break.
Obviously, I mean, it's Mr. Glass, so...
God, he called him Mr. Glass. Oh, God damn it. So good.
So, gentlemen, now that we've gone through the movie, what are your thoughts now? Let's get into this discussion. When we slow down, I got some discussion questions for y'all. Unless you want me to just jump into them right now. It's up to you.
I'm going to start off a little bit here. Movie came out in the year 2000, right?
I was 10 years old when that happened.
You were right. So, once again, I bring in this, like, because we've talked about in another podcast the super or the comic book influence to movies and to cinema. Now, technically, this was advertised as a supernatural movie because of why? It's year 2000. The only superhero movies we've had at this point were the Superman series with Christopher Reeve. We've had the Tim Burton-esque series of Batman.
I think Spider-Man, is the only. I think actually X-Men comes out either this same year or the year after. So yeah, you're
the same year.
Yeah,
the same year. So like this to me, there was never. I'm 20 years old at this point, and so I've been going to movies since I was 12 years old. And when I watched this, I was so blown away that they used this like Superman, like Batman-esque like storyline. Like, so this to me was like the first preview of superheroes and heroes and villains. Wasn't the biggest comic book fan, outside of like watching, the animated series on, after school cartoons. So when this movie came out, it was really just like mind blowing to this new genre of movie that we have never heard before, which is the superhero versus villain. Not never heard, but never to this depth. I think if this movie came out today, it would blow the fuck up because of the breath of fresh air that it would provide in this break in this intense Marvel universe. You know what I mean?
I think you're onto something. And let me add something here real quick, Ryan. I know you were about to say something. I was reading an article actually about this movie in preparation for this, and it did say something about how this film acts like a counterpoint to the big blockbuster Marvel films. Not that it's necessarily bad that those movies exist, but that they are all big, bombastic, heavy with CGI, and they all are like these big, expensive, flashy affairs. Switch over to this film. It's a very grounded, realistic approach on what appears to be just a normal dude dealing with these supernatural powers coming out of nowhere, and it offers a more realistic approach, and not the gritty Batman sense of it's realistic because it's dark and brooding, but realistic in the sense that it's very subtle, very very
organic.
It's organic, and it kind of is. The movie kind of has his relationship falling apart. And it focuses a lot more on his relationships than him actually becoming a superhero. That the superhero part is what allows him to finally realize what he needs to do and fulfill his purpose, which allows him then to be able to focus on fixing the broken relationships in his life, thus completing his narrative arc. You don't see that in any other superhero movie. All of them are about good versus evil. This is literally just a man trying to fix his life and put it back together again.
Yeah, I think it's a very beautiful organic, not organic, but very beautiful origin story of this superhero and arch nemesis kind of develop.
Yeah. I agree with everything you said. I'm not so certain how it would do if it came out today. And the only reason I say that is because we are so saturated with we're so saturated with comic book movies that I feel like entering in a brand new one that isn't actually based on a comic per se, so it won't get a lot of the hype that everybody else brings to it, and you don't have all of these old comic book fans that are like, oh my god, you don't know about fucking Captain Marvel? Oh shit, this is going to be amazing, blah, 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 blah. So you don't have that buzz kind of drumming up interest before the movie even comes out. And you'll have people who realize that it's a comic book movie and they'll get kind of tired of it because people today, if they're not like really big into comics, I know a lot of people that are just kind of comic booked out at this point.
Well, it's like the zombie thing with
And
Walking Dead and all that. It got too much.
So I think I think it's a fantastic movie. I don't know how it would do if it came out today, but I do think it came out at the exact right time because it came out just before really the comic book movie boom started to happen, and people were able to come at it with a very fresh look and a very fresh lens. And you'll see that, yes, it is a comic book story, but it's definitely the most realistic, where you take a comic book premise and you put it on top of real life, as opposed to trying to apply it the other way around.
I want to offer a counterpoint real quick about that.
Please.
I have several counterpoints to that too, Aaron, so go ahead.
All right. So I don't disagree. I think if it came out now, it would struggle. And not because it's not good, because you're right. There are a lot of comic book movies out right now. This year alone, Marvel had 4 if you count Venom. Last year, there was even more because of all the DC films that came out. And don't even get started on next year. So there is an oversaturation, to be sure. Maybe not oversaturation, but it's a crowded market.
It's definitely saturated, yeah.
Oh, man.
But
I wish this was a visual podcast because you'd see me like stirring around my little basement.
Well, hear me out, though. I think we could compromise.
I got you. I'm listening.
I personally think this movie may have come out too early because when I hear this movie get brought up, it's not really talked about in a very bright. It's never talked about in a in-depth conversation like Sixth Sense or Split or even to lesser extent Signs. I think it's one of the more forgotten Shyamalan films. I think it's because it released before comic books movies were really a big thing. Because Batman and Robin killed off the genre, and it wasn't until arguably Blade, but more arguably X-Men, when the comic book movies started getting popularity again. I'd
agree with that.
I think the golden period for this movie to have been released, hear me out here, would have been right around Incredibles in 2004, which would have been before Iron Man and Dark Knight in 2008. So somewhere in that time frame, I think would have been perfect.
Okay.
Okay. I can see that.
Because Incredibles proved that you don't have to be Marvel or DC to be successful. And I think that would have been a very opportune time for them to come in with this.
I hate to be.
Bo is chomping at the bit.
I know.
Oh my god, you guys don't even understand how bad I'm like freaking out right now. So you got to keep in mind, like, I'll be the old man here. I'm the old man curmudgeon, the cinematic historian, as we go through here. And I think as the mass, like, I had no like comic book experience going into this. So going and watching this movie, I appreciated this movie because of the fact that it like helped bridge the gap between like me, the movie nerd, and the comic book nerd out there talking about their universes. So I really appreciate this movie in the sense that like it gave me that like true gritty superhero movie. And I think when we look in the history of cinema, we have Sin City, who was a very beautiful movie based on a comic book. Mm-hmm. We also have The Watchmen, and we also have The Incredibles, which Incredibles being loosely based off The Watchmen.
Incredibles.
So we have these. Incredibles is incredible. We can go off all about that, but these are these like nondescript superhero stories that, as a cinema fan, was witnessing and enjoying what I was watching. I didn't have any preconceived notion I wasn't intimidated by the history of Iron Man. You know what I mean? Where you hear of Iron Man talking with comic book nerds, having all these different, points of reference and all these different like things that happen to Iron Man. But yet in these movies, like, what happens. They're self-contained in the 2-hour period of you watching these movies, and they were incredible. And I think Unbreakable was this beautiful introduction to like, all right, check this out. This is how the history works. There's crazy personalities in these movies. And now here's X-Men, which X-Men comes out the very same year. So when I watched that, I was like, oh my God, all right, here's these animated characters I know nothing about, but being played on screen to me in a very beautiful manner. And I think if we didn't have Unbreakable first to kind of like break the ice, quote unquote, damn, I just thought of that. That was pretty good. But, it broke the ice as far as like, hey, check this out. We're going to have this superhero villain storylines starting to come. Prepare for it. And then look what happens. Historically speaking.
Okay, that's it's an interesting take. It's different than the way I came at it, because I was familiar with X-Men when the movie came out. So when X-Men originally came out, it wasn't like a primer to, okay, this is what a comic book movie is. It was more like, we're going to show the world, hey, good movies can actually be made out of comic books. And so X-Men was kind of the test pilot, like the trial run for big studios can be like, oh, maybe we can throw a couple of million and see if we get a good return. And then Iron Man came out and blew everybody out of fucking water. I didn't tie Unbreakable to the rise of the comic book scene when I initially saw it, because I just looked at it as a story that looked at what comics do in general, and like the form of the story in and of itself, as opposed to like it being a benchmark into comic book movies per se. I feel like X-Men just kind of stood alone on its stood alone as the almost the precursor for that.
And I'm in the Go ahead.
I was gonna say it more or less did. As a cinema fan going into it, I had two superheroes that I can identify with. Christopher Reeve as Spider-Man or Superman. Oh Jesus! And then Michael Keaton and Batman. So the next like relation of a superhero minus Mystery Men, which is an incredible movie. It was this character, like this superhero type movie being parlayed, like being exposed to us as the cinema fans. And so I think without this movie, we wouldn't have had this mass connection between everyone being on board about, all right, now that this happened, let's go into an X-Men, let's go into the Spider-Mans, let's go into the Avengers down the road. I think this movie is a huge like connection that tied us movie nerds and comic book nerds all together.
I can see that. I like that. I like that interpretation.
I was like, I'm definitely in the camp of Ryan. Not that Bo's wrong, but I mean, I grew up in the same way where I was familiar with the characters. Like, I grew up watching all the cartoons as a kid. Like, I knew the X-Men. I knew
90s X-Men cartoon,
Dude, I've been listening to a podcast about the 90s X-Men because it's funny and hilarious, and I want to go back and watch it now. That's how fucking nostalgic I am for that shit.
Oh, that's great. And see, I was in this period where when all those came out, like Batman, the animated series, and X-Men, the animated series, I was in that gap of like teenagehood where like you just weren't home because you were just out doing stuff, whether it was, acting club or wrestling or, whatever it was, you were just out and active. So I kind of lost touch with like that cartoonness of shows coming out. Like I lost touch of that afternoon cartoon special. And so this was a real gap for me in the sense of like missing out on those certain things. And so as these movies started to come out, it was so new and so like organic to me.
So I will say this conversation's taken a way different track than I thought it was going to take. Not that I'm complaining, not what I expected.
Well, I think it's a beautiful movie where looking at it now and being exposed to like, and I guess I'm a little sentimental with, Stan Lee and his passing and what he's done for me as a cinema fan, and the fact that he's caused all this crossover storylines. And there's been such like a huge not interruption, but a huge change in how movies are made and how stories are told since the unveiling of the Marvel universe to cinema. And we're talking like this movie was right at the beginning of that. So, you know what I mean? So like for my influence, like I saw this movie, but then I saw the Stan Lee characters come in and just blow the cinema apart, and how we watch movies just completely differently.
Well put, sir.
Thank you, bro.
So, should I jump into some discussion points here before we get too long in the podcast?
Yes,
Sure.
I see one of them that I can't wait for you to ask, because I have a big thing.
Let's jump to that then. Let's just go to that. Which one is that, Ryan?
Are you sure?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's do it. Let's jump around. Let's have some fun.
Okay, so I'm looking at the question. Did you figure Elijah to be a villain before the reveal? And I like the first time I watched it, I didn't. Of course, I was young and stupid, wasn't really paying attention. But this time watching it, I noticed a couple of things that were weird, and I couldn't really figure out what exactly it meant until the very end of the film. So, with Elijah's character in particular, they usually do this trick of like the camera's perspective, where it just it spins around,
which is really awkward, by the way.
Yeah, it just starts spinning around and until it kind of settles. And it only happens like 2 or 3 times, like from his perspective. But you're always wondering, like, what exactly does that mean? What does that mean? And then, like, it was sticking with me. I was still trying to figure out the reason behind it. And then we get to like the penultimate scene where David is in the comic shop during the exhibition, and he meets his mom, and he meets Elijah's mom, and she says, "Do you notice how the villain's eyes are drawn slightly exaggerated? And she says it is a subtle allusion to the idea that the villains see the world in a slightly askew way from everybody else."
Wow.
And as soon as she said that, I was like, holy shit, he was pointing at Elijah the entire time. The entire time. It was so good. I just wanted to bring that up because it was really good.
It is pretty good. I actually didn't notice the point myself. I was more captivated by what she was saying. But so when I first watched this back as like a late teenager, early 20s, so not super long ago, but long enough where I haven't seen it in a while. I don't remember really like guessing he was the villain. I just kind of assumed he was. I think the reason No. So my logic is this when I went into it, and I'm trying to guess what myself 10 years ago was thinking. So I might be off a little bit. But I think the logic I had going into it was a couple different things. Number one, he kind of had a weird obsession, and he kind of fixated on these like few points. And in my history of watching comic book movies, superheroes, villains, anime, all this stuff, villains always tend to be obsessed over 1 or 2 main points. They always have a specific goal, and they harp on it all the time. It's where the monologues come in and everything. So he kind of gave me that villain vibe from the get-go. Even though he didn't like act like it for most of the time, he definitely had that vibe going for me. So I kind of felt like he always was, and when the twist happened, I'm like, oh, did David not notice this?
Well, yeah, and it's like the year 2000, he's a black guy, so of course all black guys back in 2000 were villains. So I just assumed that he was a villain.
Oh God. I would have taken, well, it's Sam Jackson. It's the only other like big actor in the movie, so obviously he's the villain. I'd have taken that.
That's also fair.
He's been a villain every single movie up until now, so of course. No, I'm with Aaron on that. Like, there was just this dark kind of feeling that he brought to the role. So I think M. Night did a really good job of like laying these layers of like, here's your anti-hero. You know what I mean? Forever we've watched all these movies where the main person is always a hero, but they really focused in on him being the main star. And I think with that, there was just something very Seven-ish about it. There's something very just like not right that sat with you. You knew there was like this bigger thing that was about to happen. Now, at the end of the movie, you didn't realize what that thing was, which ultimately makes the movie just that much better. And so I think with that, like with that character development, it was really interesting to see kind of that anti-hero end up being, the main star.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of Elijah, let's go ahead and jump to this next question here I got. So they both have a weakness to water. And my question to you is this. Why do you think water is their weakness? Is there a deeper meaning behind it? And then to take it even further, is it purely coincidental that the aliens and signs have the same exact weakness? That one's more of a gag question, but the first two are more serious.
No, total gag question, and I'm so glad that like there's a gag question, because think of Lady in the Water. There's water tied in with that one too. So like, what's this dude's obsession with water?
And then there's Avatar. There's waterbenders in that one.
Stop!
Oh my God! Is he ultimately a gremlin? Like, will he multiply after midnight with splashed in water? Do you not feed M. Night Shyamalan after midnight because he'll turn from a gizmo into a mugwai? I'm sorry, a mugwai into a gremlin? What the hell is going on with the water situation?
So Ryan, what do you think? What do you think, buddy?
I'm not certain what the water would entail as a thematic element. I don't think it's explored much in the movie outside of just, oh well, it's obviously his one weakness. Every hero has a weakness, and that's it. So I also didn't really understand the need to connect Elijah to him through the water as well, especially because you never see Elijah interact with water, period. Mm-hmm. Like, spoiler alert, if they don't have Elijah like fall into a fucking like lake like in glass, I'm gonna be mad, but that's neither here nor there. I think I absolutely think it's coincidence. I don't think it's a coincidence that water is such an important element in a lot of Shyamalan's films. I don't think there is a connection between him and the aliens and signs.
Well, okay. So, in narrative, in stories in general, water is kind of a purifying element, so to speak. Basically,
right, it's the element that represents life. Yeah.
So it makes sense for Elijah to be weak to it because he's quote unquote the villain. So water being a purifying element against him makes perfect sense. So I'm trying to figure out how it makes sense for David, and that's where I'm getting lost at.
Yeah, I'm lost with that too because we see that he saves those two girls towards the end of the movie, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That villain itself is also weakness is water too. So I'm really like before this podcast, I was trying to kind of study that. Like, why is water so significant into that particular character's weakness in that sense?
So here's my thought, and I might be off the mark here, so you guys can maybe jump in if you have an idea. So his powers, David's powers, they all stem from one key aspect. It's that he's physical in nature. He can't be hurt very easily, if at all, and he's incredibly strong. He might even be pretty fast too. We really haven't seen him do any mobility-based stuff, but we'll find out in the next movie maybe. And water itself is incredibly resistant to physical forces. It slows people down when you move in it. You can't really contain it easily with just your own body. Like, you can't pick it up and just hold water. You have to put a container around it. So maybe that's kind of what it is. It's it's not so much that it's purifying him, but it's just such an opposite effect of what he is that it affects him in a negative way as well.
All right. I can see that.
Sure.
That's the best I got with what I've given so far. I don't know.
Yeah. No. I mean, there's a part of me that feels like we're reaching just a little bit. Not that it can't be that or be any of these things. I just think that the concept of water as a weakness in and of itself isn't as well developed in the movie. It's just kind of it's obvious these guys have one weakness, so here you go. Da 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 da.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
I guess if you don't want to have a 3-4 hour movie, because then that's another point that you have to convey and describe. So maybe that's one of those things that just get left on the cutting board or the cutting floor, whatever industry people say about lost scenes. But when it came to the final cut, maybe that was just a point that just didn't make sense, and they just kind of cut it out and moved past it, hoping that society necessarily or the mass wouldn't necessarily notice that.
It's possible. I mean, even if that is the case, I still wouldn't knock it because what they kept in the movie focused on what we talked about earlier. It focused on the relationships between the people in the movie, as opposed to the necessary elements that would make it an actual comic book story. I mean, him being weak to water makes sense because all superheroes have one weakness at least.
Oh yeah.
But instead of choosing to vamp on that, they opted to focus and say, hey, we're going to work on how he's relating to his family, and the fact that he's not doing the shit that he was supposed to be doing is actually what's fucking up his personal life. So I like that they chose to focus on the real relationship type aspects of the movie as opposed to just, why is water bad? I don't know.
No, I hear you. I'm just...
And what I love that.
Go ahead.
All right, I was just gonna say, I really appreciate what you're saying in the sense that this movie had a lot of realism to it. In fact, it reminded me of reading Year One Batman and then watching Batman Begins. You see the influence of Year One, but what you don't get was this personal relationship behind the scenes. In Batman Begins, you didn't see the Jim Gordons smoking a cigarette while Barbara was pregnant. In this movie, I think that was the awesome part, was you got to see this behind the scenes relationship of these potential characters, being something bigger than what they are. So you see them in their regular day life. You're not familiar with superheroes, so you're not assuming that that's what they are. And so when it comes to the big reveal of the fact that this is a superhero versus, villain type storyline, and the fact that emotionally the whole time you're getting connected with these people on that emotional side. And I think it was really nice about watching that Year One Batman, the graphic novel, was trying to convey, and that Batman Begins did not necessarily translate to cinema.
Right.
That's fair. And I only bring it up because I'm used to stories where the weakness kind of ties into the character in some thematic way. And the best example I have is obviously Kryptonite to Superman, because Kryptonite is technically a part of Krypton or whatever. So it makes it adds a little bit of layers to it. So that's why I was kind of curious about that.
Right.
Yeah, does that ever get explained, how that works?
What, for Superman?
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm not a big comic book guy, but I was always confused about how that worked.
Kryptonite is irradiated pieces of his home planet, Krypton. So, since they're coming from his home planet, they help nullify his powers, and also it's just straight up radiation.
Because on
Oh,
Krypton,
so
they
it's
don't
like
have
an
the powers there.
Right.
Right. So it's an equalizer then.
Yeah.
More or less, yeah.
It's more than an equalizer because it pretty much kills him.
Well, I think how it
It
works.
severely weakens him.
I think how it
but
works is
So
that
how
the Krypton element itself brings them to base level, and then the radiation just expounds that even more.
I don't know. I don't buy it, and I don't buy liquid krypton bullets either. But we'll save that for a different podcast.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
we got
we've
ways
got
to
the
go.
DC shit coming up. Don't worry about it. Don't fret.
If you want to comment on our DC shit, make sure you leave comments down below or email us at evacstation@gmail.com.
Nice plug.
Nice plug. It's like
Okay.
we said
Okay.
that.
Let's see. Let's cross off this real quick because I'm keep track of what questions I'm asking here. Okay. So let me see here. Here's a short, brief one for you. How would you have talked the kid down from shooting you, and could you have done it?
Oh, dude. I'd have been fucking
Oh,
terrified.
man. I think I don't know what movie it was. Keep in mind, I'm a kid from the 80s, so there's a certain movie where a certain character puts his finger at the tip of the gun and then says, "Do it." And for some reason, the person shoots the gun, but because he closes, all the air to the rifle, it causes almost a, Looney Tunes type backfire and explodes back into there. So I would simply try to tell the kid to do it. Meanwhile, with all confidence, plugging the hole to the end of the gun, so when he does pull the trigger, it just blows back in his face. Egg on your
But then
face.
the kid dies. What the fuck?
Well,
That's the only way he'll
Yeah.
learn, Ryan. It's the only way he'll learn.
self-preservation,
No.
man. Self-preservation. Like, if he doesn't die, he's gonna learn not to put a gun in a motherfucker's face.
What the kid? Come on, guys. Y'all are wrong. Y'all are
Well,
wrong for this.
Well, Ryan, the obvious answer is simple. You use your magnetic powers to take the gun away from him and put it back at him.
oh, man,
Why?
I guess
Why
that
are
would-
y'all so hell bent on threatening this child?
Because
He's
fear is the
pulling
only
the
way
gun.
he'll
This
learn,
kid
Ryan.
needs to learn. Right.
God.
You pull a gun on someone, shit gonna go down. Like, I grew up in some very shady neighborhoods, and if you pull a gun on someone, like, there's some questions to be answered. Like, you gotta be held accountable. And if you're a kid or a grown ass adult, you put a gun in a motherfucker's face, you got some motherfucking questions to answer. So I'm gonna plug that shit up, and if it blows up in your face, I'm sorry. Don't pull guns on people.
Now, if he's holding it sideways, I feel like I'm screwed then because that means he's really serious.
Yeah. That's the gangster
Oh.
move. You run. You run.
So I don't know if I could talk him down because I feel like I'm not a good salesperson. I feel like I'm not very convincing. But I would at the very least, kind of reason to his sensibilities. Kind of say, hey, listen, man, I'm not a video game character. This ain't GTA. I'm not gonna come back if you pull that trigger. So, don't fucking pull that trigger.
I feel
Yeah.
like if anyone pulls a gun on Aaron, they already know Aaron, and they're doing it because.
Oh yeah, no.
well,
if they know me, they're gonna
know
do it
Aaron.
anyway.
Right. I think I've wanted to pull a gun on you several times.
I mean, it's only fair.
Now, what blows my mind is that every time I see these movies, which actually it's a similar scene that pops up in Split as well, but they start yelling at the kid with the gun in his hand, and I'm like, why would you ever do that? I feel like that's the worst thing to do. You definitely don't want to scare the kid into accidentally pulling the trigger. That's not a good look.
Right. Like, let's agitate the kid who's already agitated with the deadly weapon in his hand. Like,
Yeah. there was no way. Like I'm not certain how I would do it. I would absolutely try to like talk him down and calm him down and explain to him, yeah, dude, seriously, that's not how it's gonna work. But like you just start yelling at the kid, like I don't know about all that. Although I do applaud his use of like, okay, yeah, if you shoot me, it's not gonna hurt me, but then I'm going to leave because you just fucking shot me. And so even if you're proved right, you are going to lose me. You're going to lose me, or you're going to put that damn gun down like I told you to. And I thought that was a good tactic to use.
I like that.
Pretty good.
I think there was, like, in the research of that scene, too, like, when you find out that this was, like, a story that, you know, had happened before, and, you know, Reeves saying, don't shoot me because ricochet, blah, blah, blah. It adds just a certain, like, Hollywood charm to the storytelling of this movie, I thought.
Oh, yeah. So I have two more questions here to wrap up with, and we'll move on to our next segment. Number one, do you think this film needed a sequel?
Oh, fuck yeah. Hell yeah. I mean, based on...
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
No, Ryan, you go ahead.
I don't think it needed a sequel. I think it ended really, really like beautifully, and I think in and of itself, the story it told was really complete. But that being said, I love that they did it in such a way that it added on to the story. When you watch Split, and spoiler alert, when you watch Split and you and you find out at the very, very, very end that it's actually a sequel, you know, it's not like an obvious grab for cash. It's just like we told this awesome story, and then also it ties into this story as well, so there's going to be more addition. It's not just like an obvious Hollywood, oh, well, we have to have a sequel for everything. I feel like the way they did it right. They did an unnecessary sequel right. That's what I would say.
That's very fair.
I'd say it's very cop response to the movie, but congratulations, Ryan, on that. No, I'm just kidding. I almost had the like exact same response. Like, the movie holds up great, and I think the fact that you find out later, like almost 14 years later, that there is a sequel, and then very recent after that, you find out it's a trilogy. And I think with M. Night and his history, the fact that this is one of my favorite movies before Split, you know, that he did this. You have Sixth Sense, and then he goes on a very long, like, decline on movies, you know, with Last Airbender and a lot of other movies that get misunderstood, I think.
Yeah.
And so I think we'll get into that, because I don't think they're as bad as like critics beat them up about, but
no, we'll fight on that. We'll fight on it.
There are a couple that are bad, man. We'll get to them, but god damn.
You don't understand how excited I am about every podcast or every movie breakdown that we do, because especially with this one, he needed a win. And so the fact that he did tie it in just kind of like gives this method to the madness of M. Night's ultimate twist storytelling.
Yeah, well, like that's definitely something I want to bring up in Split as well, especially because of the 16-year gap. So we could save that. But yes, I think I don't think I don't think Unbreakable itself needed a sequel. I think Shyamalan needed something to kind of get his career back to what it used to be, and doing a well executed sequel to one of his best movies was a very good way to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
All right, so I've got one more here. So we've already kind of discussed how this compares to traditional superhero films and whatnot. So going off that, What could modern superhero films like your Avengers and your DC films learn from this movie?
I think we've brought it up a couple times and we started off the podcast with it, but the fact that it focuses so much energy on the relationships that make the main characters who they are, rather than all of the trappings of a comic book movie. Because I mean, Iron Man is a fantastic movie, and when you first see him put on the armor, it's the fucking greatest thing in the world. And then he starts flying and he starts fucking blowing up tanks. And he's just doing his thing. And that's amazing. That's fantastic. But the some of the real meat of the movie is Tony's internal struggles with dealing with accountability and the fact that he's created these terrible weapons and now realizes he has to take responsibility for that. And so his whole internal battle is trying to make up for his sins. That's where the meat of a superhero story is. It's not the magical hammers. It's not the bouncing shield. It's the guy who's wielding that and the relationships that make him who he is.
Anything you want to add to that, Bo?
Yeah. I mean, there's kind of a counterpoint I want to bring to that. Like, but still, with that, if you said this earlier in the podcast, if Unbreakable came out today, do you think it would have been as successful?
Yeah, I still stand by my idea that I don't think it would be as successful, but I don't think it's any less. I don't think it's any less brilliant of a movie for that point.
See, I think the reason why I enjoyed it and the reason why I thought it held up very well today, it was this breath of fresh air in the sense of like, okay, it's heavy production, it's heavy CGI with these adventure movies, and it's been a long time since we've seen this very like gritty, like superhero movie. And the fact, I think, what would make Unbreakable so nice today is the fact that it's this organic. Take a shot for every time I say organic on this podcast, by the way.
Yes, don't get the wrong.
Oh man, I've said it so many times, but I like the fact that they got to like this beautiful, like simplistic, character-based superhero movie. And if it would have premiered out, this weekend or last weekend, I would have been so excited about it because it wasn't this heavy, big budget, have to perform in your face movie. That the fact that it did develop this like sort of like twist, right?
Twist
that we haven't seen in a long time. And so I think this movie would almost be even more successful today.
It's possible. It definitely is possible.
Yeah, the film market's
we
hard
may
to read
have to
sometimes.
agree to disagree on this one, but I think it's definitely possible. I just worry that people wouldn't give it as fair of a shake because of how many comic book movies are out today.
Well, and to add to that too, there's no familiar like hero name attached to it. Like Hellboy kind of is straddling the line a little bit because it's a familiar name, but it's not the most popular familiar name. So that one kind of it's a hard sell, but it still can sell. This one, there's no like Poncho Man's not a superhero we're familiar with, so trying to sell it is a little tough.
And like you guys might remember this more than I did, but was Unbreakable actually billed like originally as a comic book movie? Did people know it was going to be a comic book movie before they went to go see it?
Based on what I read, no.
So
right,
it was actually billed as a supernatural movie. So going into it, this is the second movie from M. Night Shyamalan. So a lot of people thought it was going to have this sort of like supernatural like esque to it, and the fact that there was no real strong superhero genre to base it off of, they more or less pitched it as it being more supernatural.
Okay, all right, yeah, I buy that. I buy that. So maybe it could survive if it came out today and it had this kind of mystery, this kind of allure, as like we're actually not really sure what the fuck it is. It's by this guy M. Night Shyamalan. I'm still not sure what the fuck he's doing, but it's a somewhat supernatural movie, and it's got Bruce Willis and Sam Jackson. If it went at it just like that, and then it was revealed in viewings that it has ties to it. Like it takes a deeper look at like a comic book setting laid onto real life. Then maybe, like I could definitely see it being a breath of fresh air.
Aha! I convinced you.
All right, and I'll add to that too that I think the one thing that modern films could learn from this one, at least the modern superhero films, is maybe step back and slow down a little bit. We're always in such a rush to get to these big, bombastic moments and these big world-saving events. But what that I remember from older comic books and older like animated series of these comic book characters is some of the best storylines are very small pieces that revolve around small amounts of characters, maybe smaller problems, but they're all still as important as these big world-saving ones. And it just kind of, it's a smaller picture, and it's easier for people to digest rather than trying to be like, oh, this villain wants to blow up the world again. Yes, it's different, and I think that's something that Marvel might need to embrace before too long, especially when we go into Phase 4 and we don't know what to expect then.
Like I completely understand what you're saying, and I agree with it in a large part. But I think the big like city shattering and action pieces towards the end of it are part and parcel of what makes them so marketable for everybody. Because if you don't know shit about Doctor Strange, you can still come and see him do battle with a fucking galactic entity at the very end of the movie. You know?
But wasn't it refreshing though to come back to Spider-Man and he's literally just stopping criminals in New York and there's really nothing too big around that?
Well, I mean, Vulture was pretty damn big.
No, but I mean, he's not going to destroy the world or anything. He's just a threat to people in New York for the most part. He's a smaller villain in a smaller story. That's kind of what I want to see more of.
Okay, all right. Yeah, no, I can rock with that.
All right.
Oh yeah, and it's such a beautiful, realistic origin story that I think just, like I said earlier, we haven't gotten back to. Everything is so high production that I don't it'd be nice to have that type of story.
I can't wait to hear more about Security Man in Glass. Security Man! The fucking poncho!
Dude, that poncho is so great. The big reveal, the fact, and it goes back to Incredibles being that, capes are completely prohibited, but the fact that they just take that poncho look and then slowly reveal this awesome cape sort of superhero, I'm the man versus Mr. Glass type rivalry, I thought was so fucking cool.
I thought it was so cool too. And before we move on, and I know we're going long, can I talk about the fucking score of this movie? Because holy shit, the score was amazing. I absolutely loved that kind of heroic motif that you always got when David was doing some heroic shit. You had it in the first run where he's flashing back to the accident where he faked his injury, and he's seeing the love of his life upside down in this car, and he's thinking she's gonna die, and he rips a fucking steel door off of the car to save her and pick her up away from the burning car. That's his first moment as a hero. And you get that comes back as every couple of times. But the really big swelling moment of that is when the kids help him out of the pool and he gets to stand up in full fucking heroic attire with the music going behind him. He's standing in the rain looking boss as hell. He's about to go save these kids. I just love this music. This music really stuck out to me. The score for this movie really stuck out.
I remember it being pretty good. Pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, so the guy who did the composing of this was James Newton Howard. And I remember the same thing, like it was such an amazing like score. And they often say like, it's a good score of a movie when you don't remember the music. But I disagree with that. I think a lot of times when you are in that moment of anticipation and you feel it, and then that music comes in and just like further pushes you to that emotional limit, it actually usually makes me cry, which I'm completely vulnerable in this podcast to say that I cry in most movies anytime that there is like this awesome like orchestrated composure of music to it. And this movie did not fail. In fact, he went on to do a lot of other movies, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and then also Signs, which was another M. Night Shyamalan movie that we'll discuss.
Wait, I thought Hans Zimmer did The Dark Knight.
He was part of it.
Interesting.
He was a composer. Like he did pieces of it. Hans Zimmer, like ultimately, I think it was the head of it, but he had a piece of doing the orchestration of The Dark Knight. So.
And I'll disagree with the notion that if you don't remember the music, it's better. I disagree with it. I get what they're coming from, but I think that some of the most memorable pieces are the ones that are the best. Like, for example, as bad as the movie is, you have to admit, Duel of the Fates and Star Wars Phantom Menace is a baller soundtrack and is always one of the best things to listen to. Shout out to John Williams, by the way.
You can have all the problems you want with in the world about Episode 1, but you cannot touch John Williams in any of his orchestration for any Star Wars movie. I'll fight to the death on that.
Let me throw my hat in and like do a Royal Rumble of composers to movies, which is the nerdiest thing I've ever said. But Danny Elfman, that's my guy right there.
Oh no, I respect Danny Elfman. He made The Simpsons.
Yeah,
I love that man.
Let's have a battle royale between Hans Zimmer, Danny Elfman, and that other hack job.
Whoa! You're talking about the man who made the Jaws theme, bro. You gotta cool your jets.
Just call it podcast material, I guess.
Golly.
All right. Well, we're gonna go to the next segment here. We're gonna skip trivia for now, but if we have time in the next episode we record, I might carry us over. This is actually a really good trivia concept I came up with. So before we get into the final round, let's go ahead and do a quick mailbag reminder. If you want to talk to us about Shyamalan movies, you have a few weeks left to do that. Go to Tumblr, Twitter, Facebook, or email. Ryan, what is that email?
That is, they call me Mr. Glass at Gmail. I'm sorry, damn. Something stuck in my throat. That is evacstation at gmail.com.
Yep, that's right there. evacstation at gmail.com. And remember that after we're done with the Shyamalan movies, we'll be doing Room for the Captain Marvel release. And then after that, we have a slew of DC films. So if you have thoughts on any of those, again, comments down below, evacstation at gmail.com, or on Tumblr, Twitter, or Facebook. Plenty of options there for you. And with that, let's go into our final segment to close us out, which is ranking the movie. Again, we have our ranking system. Platinum is the absolute best. It's a must-see requirement. Gold is one we highly recommend. It's a classic nonetheless. Silver is one you all should see, but there's no hard feelings if you don't. Bronze is kind of in the middle. And then our lower ranks are stone, dirt, and shit, which is equally just going down the hole of just, it's not good. Just don't watch it. So, gentlemen, where are we going to rank our film in this this list here?
Boy, oh boy.
So we're ranking this as far as total M. Night movies, correct?
Like I said last time, I think it's fair to kind of take other films into account outside of Shyamalan. But if you want to, but I would say weigh them both and kind of see where you meet up at in the middle a little bit.
I'm gonna give it a platinum. I think this.
Wow.
I'm saying, I think this movie, like, based on my perspective and my history with movies and superhero movies, I think this was a great intro to uh, the X-Men, like, to the superhero genre that was displayed after this movie. And I think it holds up amazingly well, especially with the MC universe being so popular with movies. And I think it's a very good movie to watch. You see very iconic actors acting together in kind of an underground cult classic type movie. So yeah, hell yeah, platinum all the way.
Man,
All right.
Bo's throwing out platinums like Spider-Man throws out web fluid.
I know. I see him, right?
I'm a whore. What can I say?
I'm looking
So
forward.
I'm gonna.
Looking forward to we get to a bad movie to see how that like just poses everything.
Oh,
It's gonna be. It's just gonna be all the spectrums. Be like, oh, it's platinum. Oh, it's shit. No, it's just so bad. Don't do it.
It's so shitty you have to watch it. Platinum all the way.
All right, Ryan, where do you land on this one?
So I am going to land on a gold for this one. I absolutely love this movie. It was so much better than I thought, than I remember it being. It definitely holds up and stands the test of time. And especially watching it now, I think it provides that breath of fresh air that Bo was talking about earlier. I don't think it's a movie that everybody needs to see, but if you like comic books at all, and you really, really dig like cool character like exploration and like really compelling stories like that also somewhat fit into the comic book archetype, then I would definitely give this a watch. And the reason that I'm giving this a gold is because I think its predecessor is a platinum. Its following one is a platinum, but we'll save that.
Oh wait, so I'm handing out platinums all day, but yeah, you just handed out a platinum.
I'm just saying the movie that we're going to talk about later on, I think is a platinum. But
that's a platinum too. I mean, you already know that I'm gonna give it the platinum.
Yes, but we know you're going to give it platinum.
I'm kind of in between a couple options here.
Okay.
I'm between gold or silver. I'm probably going to lean more gold. It's not that I dislike this movie by any means, but I think that to me, it feels like it's, like I said before, it's a tad slow at points, and I feel like a few more cuts would have tightened it up a little bit and really given us a good bite to it. But I feel like it's a bit of a slog at times. It does slow down a bit, and I think that it would have been nicer to cut it up, clean up, and have the movie get to its point a little bit better. Like for example, in the beginning of the movie, there's a bit where it kind of digresses into comic book trivia a little bit. Just random statistics and shit here. But I'm reading this, and I'm like, what does that have to do with the movie? By the end of the film, I'm like, okay, so I could have cut that part out, and it wouldn't have changed a damn thing. So I'm not trying to diss this movie by any means. But I feel like unnecessary little bits like that, and Shyamalan is kind of known for throwing in random trivia to shit that doesn't need to be in there. Look at The Happening, for example.
Why would we ever look at The Happening, Aaron?
We're going to have to look at it, so let's not talk about it until
I'm just saying, he has a predilection for doing that, and it kind of comes off as pretentious to me, a little bit, and it fills up space that doesn't need to be in there. And again, I don't hate this movie, but a few cuts, I think I could have kept it in gold. I think it's just a little too loose, little too
Sure.
A little too much to be
interesting.
gold.
I can appreciate that. It's very interesting because you must have read my mind because I was literally about to ask, okay, well, what would you have cut? So I mean, you already answered it. But
I've been thinking about that.
I can see where you're coming from.
I've been thinking about it for a little bit.
Yeah, I got you. You know, and I those long scenes where, if you think about it, those are like one take scenes where the actors are really acting within the scene, you know, and I kind of was very remnant of like Quentin Tarantino scenes where you have these kind of elongated monologues. And so I kind of disagree with you in that tightness, where I really liked seeing the actors kind of just act in scenes like this. So
Yeah, I agree with Bo. I like the kind of deliberate pace that it sets, and I feel like everything that was in it, including that bit where he's just talking about comic book trivia to this one guy, I think it was necessary in the establishing of the character, because the movie is primarily a character study in these main characters that we're dealing with. And so
Right.
that like kind of extrapolation of what a comic book is, and like how seriously he takes it, how much of a student he is of the craft, I think that was important in establishing Elijah's character. So I wouldn't have lost it at all.
I feel you. I feel you.
Here's a little side question, and Ryan, I'm sorry that you may not understand this question, but to you, Aaron, would you consider Jim Dugan Mr. Glass or Unbreakable?
I don't think he fits the Glass mold. I mean, he has the comic book knowledge and trivia, but I feel like he doesn't have the obsession. You know what I mean?
Ooh, really?
Yeah, I feel like Glass is more like the comic book guy from Simpsons. He takes it a step too far.
All right. Yeah, nice. I had a good joke there, but I lost it.
I'm sorry.
I'm just curious about your opinion on that. Ryan will explain to you who Jim Dugan is later on.
Well, with that in mind, I think we can wrap up our little show here. Thank you all for watching, and next week I have it scheduled. You guys will be listening to us talk about Split.
Woo woo!
I'm not gonna
goddamn excited.
I'm not going to go any further than that, because I think we'll just flood this podcast even longer. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you after the credits.
Can't wait to talk to you guys next week about it.